With how much Mahjong has been haunting the Tetro Blue Chapter 2 narrative, I realized that this could very well foreshadow the culprit and the victim of this chapter. Make sure you stick around until the end, because this is literally my favorite theory by far, and it almost feels like this was deliberate. Also, shout out to this person, because they're the one who gave me this video idea, so thanks to them. Anyways, before we talk about Mahjong, let's talk about Mouse House, which is commonly called Mousetrap. Mousetrap is a board game about building a ridiculous, overcomplicated machine just to trap a mouse. How it works: 2 to 4 players move their mice around a colorful board. As you play, you gradually build a big contraption, a Rube Goldberg machine made of plastic parts like a boot kicking a bucket, a ball rolling down the stairs, a cage dropping, etc. You collect cheese pieces and try to avoid being in the trap when it sets off. If your opponent lands in the right space while you're under the trap, they turn the crank. The chain reaction happens and your mouse gets caught. Now tell me, does this remind you of anything? This game literally represents the events in Chapter 1 and how Akiba died, because of Akiba's routine of going into the storage room every night. He became the mouse that got caught in the trap. Alright, I know that Ono's murder method wasn't a big contraption, but the fact that she was already planning a murder 3 days before she killed shows this slow method. And just like how in the game, you have to wait until your opponent lands under the trap, just like Akiba being under the trap, until the microwave eventually hit his head and died. Alright, but what does this have to do with Mahjong? Well, I am saying that if Mouse House played such a huge foreshadowing for Chapter 1, then who knows what other things could be foreshadowing what happens in Chapter 2. And I mean, Ono and Akiba were playing Mouse House ever since day 2, so I think there's already something foreshadowing the events of Chapter 2, and that's none other than Mahjong. In Japanese mahjong, also known as reichi, it works like this. 4 players start with 13 tiles each. On your turn, you draw a tile and discard one, trying to complete a winning hand of 14 tiles while hiding your true intentions. You can claim other players' discards to complete sets. Pawn, chi, can, but clever players may bluff or bait opponents into giving away useful tiles. When you're 1 tile away from winning, you can declare Richi to increase your points and pressure to others. The first player to complete a valid hand declares Mahjong, and scores are calculated based on the hand's patterns, value, and who paid for it. Play continues for several rounds, with points accumulating and the dealer rotating, making it a game of constant observation, manipulation, and psychological strategy. Alright, so what about Mahjong? In short, it's a game of strategy, calculation, and psychological manipulation. You win by being clever and observing others, and you lose if you misread them or make a careless move. Symbolically, it's about foresight, cunning, and the consequences of your choices in the social battlefield. Each tile represents a choice or opportunity. Drawing, discarding, and claiming tiles represents manipulating situations and people to your advantage. Declaring Ricci, 1 tile from winning, symbolizes risk-taking and calculated pressure. Winning or losing shows the consequences of reading others correctly or failing to. Now, if Chapter 2 victims and culprits will show this idea, then most likely the victim and the culprit are probably someone cunning, and most likely Yaitabashi will be implicated by this. Yaitabashi is literally the one with the most death flags, with him having so much screen time during the trial. Now he and his trio are having issues, and now Mahjong is basically implicating him too. During Mahjong lesson, Yaitabashi said this was his strategy.
Sometimes I try to go for a quick win with a simple hand, sometimes I try to go for a trickier hand and a higher score. It's about reading the flow of the game.
And this says a lot about not just how Yaitabashi plays Mahjong, but also about Yaitabashi himself. Yaitabashi is strategic and adaptable, able to switch between safe and risky plays depending on the situation. He is observant and analytical, carefully paying attention to how the game unfolds and adjusting their approach accordingly. Patient and calculated, he understands that timing and flow matters more than raw luck or aggression. Out of everyone in the cast, he's the closest one to be foreshadowed by Mahjong. During Mouse House, Ono and Akiba were both playing it, then both of them were both victims and culprits. But this time, both Yaitabashi and Ichiguchi were playing it. But just because it's the two of them, I doubt they'd both die in this chapter, because otherwise, it would be too obvious by then. Like, let's just say in chapter 3, three characters just start playing Snake and Ladders. Then, are we just going to assume that all three of them are dying by then? So, most likely, Nishiguchi is probably not dying. Because even if I do believe that this trio will split up in chapter 2, they technically already split up ever since intervention. But a way to permanently break the trio is by killing one of them. But honestly, all three of them have such strong personalities, and so taking away two immediately is a waste, which is why I think only Yaitabashi is dying from the three of them. As for how he dies, he could definitely work as either the culprit or the victim. If he were the culprit, then he'd think this through. Because of his reads on the situation, he'd be able to have a calculated method of murdering, as well as securing an alibi, unlike what Ono did during the trial. Everyone would flock to him. He knows how the social dynamics work. Therefore, he'd be able to lead the class astray. It's basically survival of the fittest. However, another scenario that could happen is that he becomes the victim. Let's say someone gave him a note threatening to hurt Kumada, and since he's smart, he'd be wary of the note, but he still follows the note and gets led to the culprit's trap. Or also, how about this? If Yaitabashi does receive a note, then Yaitabashi could create a convoluted trap to trap this person, and he believes it's enough. However, the culprit could be someone who outsmarts him, someone who's seen as smart, or someone who is pretending to be a moron but is actually very intelligent. Also, the fact that Yaitabashi is partially blind, he literally has a blind spot. If Yaitabashi's blind spot plays a part on this chapter, it's either as a victim, it's because of his blind spot that causes him to not see the culprits, or as a culprit, it's because of his blind spot that causes him to leave a very important clue, which makes everyone figure out he's the culprit. As for who the other person could be that could die, if Yaitabashi is the culprit, then the victim would probably be someone we already know is smart like Hirose. However, if Yaitabashi is the victim, then most likely the culprit is someone who appears stupid but ended up besting Yaitabashi, possibly someone like Sukigata. And honestly, Sukigata fits really well. Yaitabashi and Sukigata could very well both parallel each other. Because for Sukigata, he is apparently a drug mule who was sold to a Japanese guy, and his name was fake, and his real name is actually Matthias the clerk. As for Yaitabashi, honestly, what do we even know about Yaitabashi? We barely know anything about him. During the Phobia game, his secret wasn't even revealed. And during the reward game, all that was revealed was that he's blind. What more could he be hiding? If Sukigata was hiding his real identity, then Yaitabashi could be hiding something too. But that's just speculation. Because to be fair, Sukigata and Ninomiya do mirror each other, as Sukigata faked his identity because he's living illegally, and he needs a new identity to protect himself. While for Ninomiya, he freed himself from being seen as the picture-perfect son in a picture-perfect family, and when he did, he finally got to become his real self. But considering how they're both friends, I believe it's more of something they could relate to rather than a symbolic mirroring, which is why Sukigata murdering or being killed by Yaitabashi could still work out. However, the Mahjong theory doesn't just end in foreshadowing. I believe that most of the drama will literally stem from Mahjong. Like how most problems they're facing are literally happening because of Mahjong. Alright, so Mahjong was first introduced in Tetro Blue in the episode Mahjong Lesson, starring Nishiguchi and Yaitabashi, where they both had a sentimental conversation regarding their friendship with Kumara, with Yaitabashi wondering if he should tell it to her straight. During the second time we hear of Mahjong, it's in Intervention, when it stars Yaitabashi, Nichiguchi, and Kumada, and this is literally a continuation of Mahjong Lesson, where Yaitabashi finally confronts Kumada. However, because of Kumada's own paranoia, she ends up thinking that they hate her, causing her to go away. Well, before this episode, another storyline was happening that consists of Ikeda and Tsukigata in the episode Live from Kobe, where Ikeda confronts Tsukigata, knowing that he is not a Belgian guy, which then ultimately ends in a cliffhanger. But then, the next continuation of Mahjong, no longer playing Mahjong, is in Settle Chat, which has Ikeda and Kumada. Because of Yaitabashi and Ishiguchi suddenly not liking Kumada's attitude, Kumada argues with Ikeda, which brings Ikeda the idea to get back at Kumada. Also, just a little fun fact. Live from Kobe and Settle Threat both happen in the Rec Room. A Rec Room is a place of work in which people can relax and play games. However, they're doing the polar opposite in both episodes. Anyways, heading to dinner in conflagration, which included every remaining student alive, Ikeda decides to go out Tsukigata's real identity while implicating Komada in the process, by claiming that it was because of her attitude that pushed Ikeda to go that far. And lastly, as of day 10 in Supplication, which stars Ogura and Tsukigata, in which he begs for Ogura to get him and Ikeda out of Kobe. Like, how did the main conflict in chapter 2 so far start because of Mahjong? It literally caused a butterfly effect, and most likely it doesn't end here. Like, I mean, they even made custom music for it. It all seems deliberate. In Mahjong, there's also a lot of symbolisms behind it. Mahjong starts with random tiles like how life gives you circumstances you can't control. But how you play them, when to discard, when to risk, when to wait, reflects your decisions. In Japanese mahjong, especially players talk about the game's flow, the unseen rhythm of luck and timing, like to go with the flow or break it when it turned against you. Everyone hides their hand while trying to read others hiding the truth, testing trust. Mahjong becomes a reflection of social dynamics, manipulation, and performance, especially in stories about rivalry and tension. The table looks chaotic with 136 scattered tiles, but every move has structure, like finding control and meaning within this order. You can win early for a small score or risk it all for a high value hand. It mirrors human nature. When do you settle, and when do you gamble everything for something greater? Every player's move affects the others. One player's discard can make or break another's victory. In stories, mahjong tables often act as microcosms of society, where people reveal who they truly are through how they play. Overall, mahjong symbolizes life, what this may bring, how you deal with it, how dynamics affect your game, but most importantly, it's a game of wit. And before we end this video, there's something I'd like to go back. When talking about Mouse House, it did symbolize chapter 1, but Mouse House is a slow, gradual process that takes a longer time compared to what Ono came up with. But Mouse House is still being mentioned in chapter 2, like in Rematch. That's why I think the chapter 5 murder is probably one that is still being set up since the first week. So, how was that theory? This is definitely a theory I am very proud of, and it could very well happen. Anyways, I'm Maris, and if you want to watch more videos like this, then make sure you subscribe so that you don't miss the next one.